So hi, everybody. I love so many things about Davos, and we were just talking backside.
We haven't even started.
Yeah, it's a lovely view, right?
But Judith and I, in front.
Yeah, it's, the two seats are left. But I think what I love the most is the fact that by the end of this week, I end up losing some weight. Because we tend to eat less. Davos is all hungry about knowledge, exchanges. And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our panel, which is a great discussion around the topic of what is a job in the era of AI, next-gen organization structure, strategy, and scale. So this discussion is not about technology. This discussion is not about geopolitics, what we are talking about, but it's more about leadership. So when you talk about AI and agentic and physical AI, it's taking more and more execution. It's supporting in decisions, but if I look at May, it's also might take autonomously some decisions in future. So that is fundamentally changing the definition of job and our assumptions about the job. What does it mean for an operating model, for a company? What does it mean for the young talent to come up with a new skill? So that is exactly the kind of discussions we want to have today. And I have got esteemed panelists in my room, and with a different viewpoint. So we have representatives, representing the company with more than 100 years of global footprint. But then we have something like AI native firm. So it's quite interesting to see that viewpoint, from that perspective. So I take the privilege to introduce my panelist. So welcome, Judith. So Judith, she's the Chief People and Sustainability Officer, member of the Managing Board, Siemens. So everybody knows Siemens. It's a global technology firm, and they're doing a lot of work in terms of industrial AI. And I was recently reading somewhere, Siemens believes that AI will be as transformative as electricity was for this century. And this is how true. In terms of professional, Judith is a people person. When it comes to people, she's not looking into their CVs, but what people brings to the transformation. So if you guys want to apply to Siemens board, it's not about your CV, it's what you bring on the table. And I like the fact that Judith is also extrovert and talking a lot about organizations and how organizations should move from resources to people in organization. That's why she named from HR to people in organization. So welcome, Judith.
Thank you.
Yeah. So next panelist, I have Alessandro de Luca. So he's the head of Digital Enterprise Solutions and Group CIO Merck. So everybody knows Merck again. It's a global science and technology company based out of Darmstadt. And Merck has 3 sectors around healthcare, electronics, and life sciences, and they're doing a big-scale AI into improving patients' life and customer journey. Alessandro is also a good friend, and he's passionate about technology, transformation, digital transformation. And on personal front, when it comes to stock market, he's the guy to go for an advice. He's by heart mathematician and a strategist when it comes to chess playing. So my Italian friend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro. So then we have May Habib. So May, she's a co-founder and CEO of Writer, an enterprise AI platform for agentic work. So Writer has spent the last 5 years pioneering the enterprise AI category, leading the market with end-to-end platform. And when it comes to AI, I was reading somewhere, May, you believe that AI should not only answer the question, but it should run the workflows. And that's exactly what you guys are doing with the Writer.com and Writer. On personal front, she comes from a Lebanese family. She's the oldest one in the family with 8 siblings.
Oh, good research.
Yeah, I did that. So, and that's the kind of resilience she has learned and the leadership she has learned from the family perspective. And I was doing, everybody knows that, but Writer has been recently valued as a unicorn with $2 billion. So congratulations, May.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's start with the panel, and I would like to warm up my panelists. So my first question to all of you, it's the 3rd day in Davos, and I don't want to talk about geopolitics. So except geopolitics, what has excited you the most in the last 3 days? Judith.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's also a function of where I've been, of course, yeah, but I like the depth and sincerity by which we talk AI, yeah, both in terms of possibilities of how it changes work, the nature of work, the role of the human, and I think there's two camps, yeah, the doom and gloom, AI is going to take over, the humans are, it's just a question of time and we will no longer be in the loop, and there's the other camp that by my very nature, I like to believe in, which is does it augment and to what extent does it augment, and is there a role for us still, and I think some of it gets quite philosophical as well, but I like that, yeah. So there's a productivity and a philosophical debate, and I think I'm excited about both.
That's nice one, Alessandro.
I think it's about the convergence of science and technology. I mean, in the past in Davos and also in other areas, there was the scientists from one side, so we know the science of medicine, I mean, healthcare and so on, and then the technologists. I mean, this is technology and so on and so far. Now it's more and more converging, so more and more AI applied to science, wherever it be. I mean, I had 5 minutes discussion with May, and she was telling me from a technology standpoint, you are entering life science. So this merging of discussion about the convergence of these two fields is great. It's great for the industry, it's great for the society, and it's great for us as patients.
Yeah. I've loved the ambition level around agentic transformation, and it is now like glaringly obvious that for all intents and purposes, it is AGI time, right? It is 10,000 times easier to build software, and what happened to coding in 2025 is coming to all knowledge work in 26. And that is a very empowering, democratizing impact on the business, and the ambition level is there from executives to take advantage of that. So we're going to see this agentic transformation of the traditional stack inside of the incumbents, which is going to allow them to operate a lot more nimbly, a lot more agile, and they're going to look a lot more like startups, which is fun because you get to go faster. It's much more collaborative, higher impact that these creative teams can have. And so I'm very excited for what it's going to mean for enterprise work in 26.
Interesting. I think this discussion is going to go in the right direction to have the debate around that topic. So starting with you, Judith, taking a deep dive, looking at now AI, agentic, what is a job in the new world? How would you define that?
Yeah, so let me go at it from a very basic definition. No? If you look at a job, at the end of the day, it's a group of tasks or activities that are supposed to perform a certain outcome. I mean, that's the very basic level. And economically, you want to do minimal input for maximum output. That's the job at its purest. And I think every company at this stage is on the journey of learning which tasks can be automated and where do you augment. And agentic, of course, as you already said, means we're going from execution tasks to taking orchestration tasks, and some of it, even agentic, is going to take over. And I think we're still trying to understand, how quickly, how fast that goes, because, in full transparency, I think agentic is used in different ways today. Is it just the orchestration of different core pilots, or does it actually even go further than that? I also think there's then the big debate about how does the nature of a job change, and what does that make for what does that do with the human, and where is there really truly human value? And I think that's what we're still trying to find out. And I think where we are today, the human in the loop is still there from a context, from a judgment perspective, from an ethics perspective, from a purpose perspective. And we just need to see how quickly maybe even that territory is going to get challenged. But if you allow me to be philosophical for a minute, I think for humans, a job is something much more. In an ideal world, a job is a piece of identity. Who are we? Because we are that, for many hours a day. It is about, where do I contribute? It feeds our need for connection to a certain point. And I think we need to understand to what extent do we maximize on the technology that may not care about these things or doesn't care about these things. What organizations are we ultimately ultimately building. So I think there's a real conversation about, you know, the choices that we make about not just what the technology does, but also how we want to apply the technology.
Beautifully said, Judith. And I think I picked up the words, and you said one word, it was around the outcome base, right? That's what is shifting. So may I jump onto you and I ask you, you know, now we're shifting, as Judith just mentioned, you know, the job remains, you know, what's the human value and what's the human nature, but how companies need to prepare themselves, because now there's a shift happening from tasks to outcomes. What does it mean? And now you being an AI native firm, if you have to advise, you know, a traditional 100 plus 200 years old firm. So what's your viewpoint on that?
Yeah.
350.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judith.
350. That's 350.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely,
Between us, we do, I think, 450.
So 400 plus, exactly.
Exactly. So the average is 100.
just half a millennia. Yeah, round
Yeah,
down. Yeah.
Round it up. Yeah. Okay.
I definitely agree with the second part, right, of the job definition. Work structures life. It gives people dignity, meaning. It's just, you know, UBI to me and some people's vision of where we're going is dystopian. I mean, I don't think we want that. But the first part, I think it's already here. The transition of jobs being, you know, a set of activities and tasks to literally an outcome. You are responsible for this outcome. Yes, the most efficiently you can do it, the better, versus, you know, the previous construct of the more people you have, the more budget you have to achieve an outcome, the more powerful, right, and higher you climb. That outcome is gonna be the job. And the collapse of team and functional silos in service of these outcomes is going to be a really, really drastic change that the incumbent firms have to embrace to move at the speed of the technology and to really embrace it. The vast majority of the organizations that we deal with still are trying to take disruptive technology and put it into an org chart built for the last century of human oversight, of human level task execution. And that's just not going to work. We need new org structures, which is why it's so exciting that very forward-leaning people officers are looking at this technology. We need much more collaboration. We need outcome-based SWAT teams in an org that prove that you don't need functional silos to be able to get very important work done. And workflows and I mean, you are both in highly regulated, highly complex industries, but there is no business process that can't be articulated, that cannot become an agent. And we talk to our customers about, everyone's heard about zero-based budgeting. How about zero-based process design? Like, can you wipe away for the most important processes in your business and design a process, right, that is taking advantage of essentially what AGI is, and actually then design an org chart around that versus trying to retrofit new technology on really, really now antiquated org charts.
That's a big transformation journey, and I love the fact what you mentioned from zero-based budgeting to zero-based processing. I think that's exactly what we need. But I take it to the next level, you know, and it's not it's not a secret anymore, but lots of companies, they're talking about agents and humans. They're coming at parity, right? So if Amazon talks about that they have a workforce which is 50% humans and 50% agents, that's a big, bold statement. And I know, Alessandro, you as a Merck with highly regulated, you know, it comes to life sciences and the healthcare business, as you mentioned, the patient, that becomes very critical. And when you see an organization like Merck going through a big transformation, what is your viewpoint and what are the challenges you're going to face if the workforce really comes to that parity?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good question. So first, I would start that we start from the people side. And in fact, our transformation, digital transformation, whatever you want to call it, we do in partnership with HR, because we believe it's people and technology. Eventually, it's people, technology, and data. But that's very important, because also the message to the organization is that this is not a technology transformation. This is a joint people and technology transformation to drive business outcome. Then what both my colleagues said is very important. We talk about the job, we talk about the role. In reality, it's a complete new operating model, because there is not anymore in this hybrid configuration, could be 50-50, could be 70-30, whatever it is, between agentic AI and human, hierarchy will be changed. So, and the mistake that we do, we try to replicate a current organization, put the agent. No, we should start from zero. That's a challenge that we face when we are not greenfield or AI native and we have a bit of legacy. It's really like, okay, how do we tackle it? And the first step, like I said, is to do it jointly. The second step is really to make sure that you embed that processes, data, and technology at the same level. And allow me to say, we consider technology, so we consider technology as a commodity. The differentiator are the complete redesign on processes. The differentiator is not to talk about technology, but architecture design. And the differentiator is not to talk about data as an abstract element or a sexy element, but talk about master data management. Because then, believe it or not, I'm going to say something that's not sexy at all, but the future is AI, the present is AI, but without a proper master data manager that is as unsexy as it sounds, no model could work. No organization could build on the next level. So all this mindset change, that eventually the master data manager is more important than the advanced business planner and so on and so forth, that the architecture of the system is more important than technology itself, that the complete new processes operating model is more important than the rule and the hierarchy. It's really a mindset change that we can do only together with the organization within a company like Merck that is 350 years old.
Yeah. I'll remember
Just
that.
to underline.
No, you beat us. You beat us.
No, posso ashish because
No, but I think then we picked up the topic of process and operating model, and I think that's where the people and the skills, that becomes quite challenging. So, Judith, I was talking to you backstage. I stole that word from your article, reskilling paradox, right? So she recently wrote an article and where she introduced there's a reskilling paradox happening in the world of agents and AI, right? So when you talk about, there's a massive investments, but there's a yet distrust from the employees. They believe that this is not working out. So why do you think that employees are looking at this investments around AI so critical, although a firm like Siemens or Merck, and also maybe, Writer, they think that we are doing it for the sake of good for the employees, but it's somehow, there is a paradox. Why?
Yeah, so I think what we need to be careful about is that we don't make this a threat to people in terms of adoption, but that we truly understand how to mobilize. And I think that's been always the case with larger change. So I think that paradox has existed whenever there is a big investment also needed from people in terms of their skill set and where they are disrupted and therefore less confident about am I actually relevant? Yeah, how am I going to be relevant? And we need to make sure that people don't freeze. Yeah? We need to make sure that they have a chance to engage with that new technology, but they also take responsibility for their future. Because we're all here we're all signing up for a 50-year career. At least I think my children will. And so if you don't understand that staying relevant is something that is in your very own interest, and the role of companies is to provide the infrastructure, to provide means, to provide direction on what is meaningful learning. I think you don't find each other, and we still have 27% of our workforce in Germany. Co-determination is a big thing, and we've actually leveraged that as well to make sure that the Works Council is actually on board and helps lower some of those barriers. But I think we also need to make sure that we don't confuse the AI conversation, because I think there is something that we call the everyday AI, which is in the enablement of people. It is in how does AI find me in my workflow as it is today, as it is slowly changing and not yet radically changing. And there's something about each and every individual to make sure that they work on their skills. And I think the types of skills that are important is and particularly as a German engineering company, we tend to over-index on functional technical. But I think it is increasingly the foundational or transversal skills of, do I know how to learn? How do I deal with change? Critical thinking in the age of AI, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are things that are absolutely necessary and I think mutual on both sides. But I don't think that you get to the kind of AI radical change if you don't look into processes hard, operating models hard. And for us as a company, we want to be the leader in industrial AI. It's not just what we do for ourselves or how we leverage AI for ourselves. It is about how we actually make sure that as a business we go through the next S-curve and really become that leader in industrial AI in partnership with, because that's, I think, another transition that we've gone through over the last few years. There's a saying, that Siemens can do anything that Siemens applies itself to, but is that meaningful, and shouldn't we, don't we get much more done in partnership much more quickly? So I think there's actually a number of also cultural shifts that are happening as the technological shift happens. And then my last comment, and I think that's where you were, I mean, any big transformation is always one that will stand and fall with adoption rates. It's always about people in leadership at the end of the day, how quickly organizations are actually able to move on, whilst we tend to over-index on the technology and the process, but from a change management perspective, it's always been a 70-80% that's actually the behavior change, that's actually the cultural change.
And I like that what you said, am I relevant? And I would also love to be relevant for the next 50 years. I think everybody in the room, and that makes full sense. So if I look at you on that front, and so this reskilling and what Judith just mentioned, what is your viewpoint on that when you look at it purely as an AI native? Would you agree to all the points what you mentioned, or would you disagree on some of the points, looking at it totally differently, being a startup and a unicorn?
Yeah, it's such a fundamental re-understanding of your role when you think about what is possible with agentic AI. And as a generative AI native company, we're basically a different company every 3 to 4 months, because the next version of our models means there are brand new capabilities that we have to productize over and bring to our customers. And so every single function really changes pretty dramatically every, I would say, 4 to 6 months, right, as we digest what the models are capable of. And so that's meant a few things in our organization. We don't really have managers in the traditional sense. We have coaches, enablers, people who are hands-on in the work, right? There's not really this concept of people who only do management. The second thing is work tends to be complete by the time you are debating whether you do it or not. Right? This is not a culture of here is a brief and then that goes into a full memo, that goes into a spec, then we get V1s of a product. When people are pitching ideas, it's live in the product, you're working with it. And that goes also for changes in our customer journey or how we want to bring this technology to the customer. And lastly, things go viral no matter who built it, right? It is a many-to-many information exchange that really feels like organized chaos. And when we bring in new people, I've heard this kind of similar type of phrase, their corporate brains explode at what it means to go writer speed, because we are actually working with a complete artifact by the time we're making a decision, and it is really, really different the way that you test, experiment, ship, make decisions. The barriers between teams are uncomfortably disappearing. So we could have someone from our customer organization pitch a feature for our IT observability suite, right, that gets approved and actually skips product design, maybe even skips the product manager who's responsible for that, right? And the whole organization is responsible for an outcome. And the people closest to the work, their opinions weigh the most, right? And because the artifact is complete, you're actually getting market data. It's not anybody's opinion, right? Internally, it is just a much more informed opinion. And so, if as a product designer, it dings your ego and you can't get up the next day, a generative AI native company is not the place for you.
Yeah. Can I crash the process and ask May a question?
Yeah.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Because I think what's going to be really fascinating, listening to you, and I think we've been on somewhat of that journey for the last few years around what does it mean to be in control, etc. Because I think at the end of the day, that is a lot of where the leadership change sets in. And we've been talking about, you becoming a coach rather than a command and control. Questions are more powerful than having all the answers. So I think, those things we have been talking about for quite a number of years. But I think at the end of the day, it does boil down to how are you, how do you feel in control of what you've been asked to manage?
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk a little bit to that notion of control, need for control, where is it legit? How do you do that in an AI company, and what does that mean for leadership? Is that okay?
Please go ahead. I love the conversation. I think
Yeah.
that's the debate we want.
The democratization of context is essential to making everybody feel like they've got an equal shot at influencing the decision and making the decision happen. And what do we mean by that? A lot of companies will say, oh, we're not ready for AI, our data is a mess. And we'll say, okay, but really with agents, it's not your data being a mess that's a problem. It's your know-how, your processes, what makes up your organizational DNA, your reasoning, your human decision-making being opaque. That being a mess is going to limit your progress. Because your best employees, do they have a clean desktop and access to all the data? They know how decisions are made. They have the right context, right, to make a decision. And so agentic success is about putting agents in that flow of decision making. And we have literally built a system that can query the user back. Why did this decision get made? And that context, the management of that context is really important. So we've been proponents in building knowledge graphs since, the first year of our existence. That has graduated, and the techniques and what we use, literally are constantly getting reinvented. But I think the new CMS is a context management system, right? And how does that actually get encoded in a model that is your IP, right? That's not generically going into a model that everybody else is using. And, can we bring in our context that lives in Slack, our context that lives in email, our context that lives in CRM to help everybody understand? And so, yes, finally, we're at the place where asking the right questions is the most important differentiator, right? Versus having all the answers. But we need to equally give people, right, with guardrails, et cetera, access to those answers so that they can, have the same context as everyone else.
So asking the right questions, May, I think I love that. And I also detailed with my questions on that front. And asking the right questions. So if I look at you, Alessandro, would that be the next critical human capability what you need in this agentic world? Because if agents are taking more and more, decisions or supporting the decisions, and who's asking those questions? Are we going to measure the new skills, the human capabilities around just ask the right question? Is that what you expect from human beings to do in the future? I'm talking next 5 to 6 months.
I'm not sure. So what I'm trying to say is that we have been defining success of LLMs in being able to do the right prompting. And now we are thinking about it, asking the right. So first of all, asking the right question is always valid. It's valid with agentic, it's valid with human, it's valid with society. So asking the right question is a skill that we should maintain. I think is really going beyond what we think today is the world in terms of corporate. It's important in the sense that what May said and also what Judith said. So number one, the world and the corporation and the organization are dynamic. What is valid today is not valid anymore probably tomorrow. Technology change, asking different questions change and whatever. So the capability to have a mindset that what is valid today is not valid anymore tomorrow, even technology. Sometimes I go to the board and we discuss, we go for that technology, that vendor, and then after 6 months I come back and we say, we change. And then, what do you mean you change? Because technology changed so fast that we call it a revolving door strategy. We should be able to design a modular architecture so to make sure that changing the mindset or changing the approach or challenging the status quo is a virtue, is not a sign of volatility.
Yeah.
And then I love the paradox, like you said it, because we have the same, and I thought we were the only one, like we reskill, we have skill, but the reality is that, so first of all, people struggle with it, and secondly, also sometimes it's not as beneficial as we would expect. And I think you describe it very well in your article in LinkedIn that I invite everybody to look at it, because indeed we should, the boundaries between, trainings that are something theoretical and work that is something real, like realpolitik, where these boundaries match is where the system cracks. And then when people say, okay, I've been reskilled and upskilled, but the world is different and so on and so forth. So this dynamicity of what is happening today in the technology, data and processes, and this different mindset is very, very important. In fact, I say, and then I close, is that scaled adoption is key. But speed, like you said it, that you change company in 3 months, we change probably organization design in 3 months, and that's a competitive advantage. And the people who are able to engage in this different shift of mindset that was valid today may not be valid tomorrow, may or may not be. So being open is for me the key skill that I'm looking for to drive transformation.
Being open. I think that I look at you, Judith, and let's take a futuristic outlook. Looking ahead, 2030 is not far away. So it's 26, but with a snap, it's gone. So if you look at Siemens, and now listening to also May, what is AI native for you in future for Siemens? And what is the role of your people in organization? I'll not call it HR anymore. People in organization, strategic role in order to make this happen for a company like Siemens.
Yeah, so I mean, you already alluded to it, how you put agents into the flow of work in a very different way, and at which points you're actually interacting with them, and how you're interacting with them, and what that then means in terms of how you design organizations. I think it's also very fair to say, that we are in the makeup still a relatively traditional organization. Yeah, so we still have work to do to change, and I think there's decisions that we take today that will decide how fit we are in terms of really doing that tomorrow. And on where AI, is something that we build for our customers, we already have very different ways of working. We've already, we've also put these teams aside, so that we also treat that group differently and let them get on with a very different way of working. Agile pods, that will move from one use case to the next in very quick time. But I think there are some key choices that we need to make today, where things simply are not evolution anymore, but where you really need to break things, where you need to break, and establish new artifacts, where you really need to say, how does leadership really need to transition? What do you value? And I think we came across that as well in the discussion. What do you value today, both in your work, but also what do organizations value? Yeah? Is it status? How do you derive status? And if you don't think those things through, you're going to get opposition, and that's going to have an impact on the pace of change by which you go.
And that's quite interesting, Judith, just to go further on that, because you mentioned leadership and the value system. So now, in this new world, when you go forward with that transition for a company like Siemens, who is accountable going forward in future when you have, this mixed, let's fast forward, you're able to create that and scale that up within an organization like Siemens. So how do you see accountability, and what is the role of a leader then?
Yeah, and that's why I was curious, because I think that goes a little bit into what I said about control, because at the end of the day, somebody still needs to run the company, and there are certain things that you do need to be in control of, your business model, quality, ethical decision making. So I think there clearly is still a role for leadership, and that's why I come back to the key question of, is not so much what grappling with the technology or asking what the technology is going to do to us, but how we are really making conscious choices about where do we go about deploying it. But one of the things, and we just had our Siemens Business Conference 3 months ago. What I said is, for today, I think there's the leadership paradox is that, everything changes and nothing changes, because in leadership, we do go back to some of the things we've been discussing over these last few years. If you don't have psychological safety in teams, nothing's going to change. Yeah? If you don't focus on the famous growth mindset, if people don't ask the what's possible question, you're just not going to get very far. If it's all about,
Status quo
and, trying to get by with the cards that I have, you're not gonna move things. And there's a role of leadership to say, how do I signal this is important? How do I support? How do I truly redesign systems that I run? And that goes into the whole process, value proposition perspective. And those are big decisions to make. This is not about tweaking. This is about being really mindful of where you drive interventions and how you signal those interventions to the organization.
Everything changes and nothing changes. I love that what you said, and that's a leadership paradox. And so I take it back to the fear. You mentioned the word fear, and there is a level of fear when I look at the young talent. So when I talk about technologies, right? So you go back, calculators. So I come from an accounting firm, right? So calculators came in, work never reduced. Excel came in, work never reduced. Work was changing. And there is a fear with agents coming in, with companies like Writer coming in. So where do you see, is that the trend which will continue, that will increase the work? And if yes, what kind of work do you see popping up more and more, and what is disappearing?
Fear coming right after your everything changes, nothing changes made me think of something. We recently have had just so much dynamism and creativity in how our customers do onboardings, right? So we do a lot of in-person trainings, hackathons, et cetera. And just literally the last, couple of months, we had one of our strategic transformation leads for his hackathon with a major media brand in the US, a public company, hundreds of people there. He built an app in Writer, right? So this is like very meta, writer on writer, to basically manage the hackathon. And so you had on your phone the ability to judge, to give feedback, to give prizes, et cetera, right? I thought that would kind of like go viral, right? And other people would do it. But he's been the only one who's done that so far. Another woman also, and I'm, as CEO, right, elevating, I'm valuing, right, the creativity, right, of what folks are doing. Someone else, again, another big, innovation day for a customer, built for every break, just games and Writer, like ping pong, all sorts of things, literally just by writing it, right? We give very, very powerful tools to build for the business. And so demonstrating that, and again, like a pool, who won, you can bet on it, very, very exciting. Fear comes from stretching beyond the table stakes, right? So from a leadership perspective, we've set what are the table stakes best practice for an enablement and a kickoff. It's always going to be scary to try something new, agentic or not. Like that's the thing that has never changed, right? And the psychological safety of, being someone who gets rewarded, even if that fails, right? That is always going to be true for management, regardless of what the medium is. And so, yes, fear, everything has changed, nothing has changed. And, can we now, knowing what's at stake, these really important business outcomes, it's not incremental gains to be had, it's monumental gains to be had. Can we really work on this foundational, right, safety so that people do take more risk? Because now, yes, the outcome is so far greater, right, if you do take, if you buckle up and face your fear and do something new and different.
And Alessandro, being a 350 years old company now, I remember that. So on that front, if you have, when you listen to Judith and May, what they just mentioned, so if you are building up a new talent and trying to scale up your transformation journey in AI as a leader, so what kind of human behavior you will prioritize? It's not about the skills, because the skills are also like kind of fluid, but anything on behavior front you as a leader looking for?
Well, it's a question that we ask us every day. For sure, curiosity. For sure, curiosity. So curiosity is the fundament of everything. And curiosity has been one of our values also as Merck, like be curious, ask questions, like we said before, go to the other places. The other one, willingness to do a career that is not a ladder, but is interdisciplinary.
Yes.
So really and again, we talked before about conversion of science and technology, and that happens also if individual, you work in marketing, you go in IT, then you move in product supply, whatever it is. So careers that are different, and this is a different set of mindset. And then people that are able to work with an entrepreneurial approach. What if this would be my company? This is very, very important because then it's the only way that we can be near to a startup mindset that is fundamentally, for us, bridging the culture of a startup with an old legacy company would be really the frontier where we aim to.
I think something for the audiences, at least for the young talent, to be more curious when you want to build up your career. So I think there's one sensitive topic I would like to bring it again in the room. I think we are discussing this less and less. But I think, Judith, what is the role of AI in the S part, the social part of ESG? Right? There is a lot of talk about biases, hallucinations you talk about. But how do you ensure this thing, and how do you want to tackle this? Because when it comes to evaluation, assessment, career progression, and you use agentic also for your people in the organization. So how are you looking at this?
I think this is actually an easy one for me, because I think also here you go to the glass half full, glass half empty. I am where you are. I think AI has the huge power to democratize knowledge, also specialist knowledge, by the way. And that's why I think, going back to leadership, it's so interesting. Any leader that really still works on the currency of I hoard my information and I deal with, those days are gone. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of access that AI gives us to learning. There's in the way that we do learning in Siemens, but that we can also do societal learning in communities that we operate in and broader, where the AI, the technology actually helps to curate actually what you should be learning. Yeah, highly personalized. Yeah, accessibility of things. So there's such a rich world out there by which the AI, again, if applied with purpose, actually is a huge enabler of the S in ESG. And of course, we shouldn't be blindsided to the risks. Yeah, how do you train models? Do you train biases into the models? And so I think there's a responsibility that we have as companies to make sure that there's good governance from an ethical perspective, that we understand sufficiently about how this works, and that we have some quality checks on that front. So I don't think we should be naive about that side of things as well. But I think we can really double down on where AI is a massive enabler for the S, rather than treating it as a risk.
As a risk, yeah.
So as a risk.
Yes,
actually, can I build on what Judith said? I think you're absolutely right. We need to not be naive and double down on technology. We are doing a program called Tech for Inclusion because we believe tech can help, like you said, to be much more inclusive. We can provide hiring aids, online translation real time, even system like GPT that help to summarize meeting minute, help for disorder people that have some neuro disease. So I think technology can do great to be much more inclusive and give access to knowledge to many other people. So again, like every technology has negative side and positive side, if we leverage the positive side to create more inclusive, AI can really make the difference.
And to think about the access to healthcare in remote places. And
absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that, and just to bring some fun factor, I think I heard the word responsibility. I'm a big fan of Spider-Man movie with great power. You have got AI with great power. With great power comes what? Great responsibility. I think that's what we as a leader need to become more like a Spider-Man, if I may say like that.
Yes.
I love that fact. So looking at the time, because I would like to open up also later for the audiences, but let's be futuristic.
Half a millennia out.
50 years now.
No,
yeah?
500.
500. No, that
500. Wow, me.
So 500 would be great. But let's say 5 to 10 years. Let's have a strategic outlook. I think the world is changing 3 to 6 months in certain part of the world. I would agree to that. And I come from, from India, but I live in Germany. That's a different pace in Europe. But let's say strategically, 5 to 10 years. You have to add to these questions, all three of you. What choices are we making today, which is going to make a big impact on this human-AI convergence or human intelligence? Who would like to start first?
I'm happy to go. I mean,
Yeah.
I think in 10 years, we're going to get work done by thinking about it, right? I think a lot of people, it won't be a majority yet, will be able to interface with the agents that they've designed for themselves, both in their personal and in their professional lives, simply by thinking about those agents and the kinds of outcomes they want to drive. So I'm very excited about that. I see that in our roadmap and our future. I've told my co-founder, technical genius, my entrepreneurial career is not done until I can send email from the shower by thinking about it, right?
Wow.
Approve agents, right? So, I think we're there in 10 years.
10 years, okay. Sure.
I can go. In healthcare, we talk sincere about personalized, predictive, preventive medicine. I think this will really happen. I think in 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, all our biohacking digital system will be connected to a broader picture so that we could really understand and proactively manage our care, our longevity, and really being as patient at the center of healthcare, not other entity across the farm. And this is really happening as we speak. It's still fragmented across technology, system, and so on, but this will really happen. I mean, there will be a dramatic benefit change for all of us because really we'll move through this personalized.
We're all wearing them.
We are all wearing
Judith, are you wearing one?
I'm getting it for my birthday, which is soon.
Exactly. And whatever is the system will tell us upfront what to do, how we are, also on the emotional standpoint. So really will be holistic. So we'll go back to the medicine of the Greeks that was for the human being, patient-centric, and that's what will be the future.
Yeah, and in terms of what Siemens is all about, I mean, we want to help design products differently, design products already with the process in mind. So there's a massive opportunity in terms of how we think industry today, and that helps both with demographic shortages on labor in certain geographies. It also helps from a sustainability perspective. It helps thinking circularity, so resource efficiency, circularity, as much as decarbonization as well. So I think there's human impact, but there's also planetary impact where the technology can help. And like I said before, I hope that we can make those interventions into how we lead, how we run our systems today internally that really allow us to get to that place as quickly as possible. But I like the future to be definitely glass half full or 3/4 full, and not be naive about the other things.
Thank you so much. I think that's wonderful. And, I forgot to introduce myself, but I remember what May just said. Sending emails, taking a shower. That's something as a KPMG CTO I would love to do at some point, because that will reduce my work on the advisory perspective, but also, as a going back to medicine of Greek and, having a glass half full or 3/4, I think that's the best choices we have to make today. Yeah. I think that's how I also see future. With that, thank you so much, guys, for this wonderful session. And I'd like to open up the Q&A. So there are lots of questions popping up. So,
wow.
So I saw, first you in the end, because she was the first one to raise a hand. Please, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for a really fascinating conversation. I have a question. Are we creating the haves and the have-nots? Because this was very much a big company, OECD type conversation. We have very poor countries in this world. And what is it, if I'm in Sudan, will I be totally left out of this? And how are you going to address those issues? And the second question is, how are you going to power it? Because AI and data centers gobble up immense amounts of electricity?
I mean, I will shamelessly quote AJ, who I listened to intently this morning from the World Bank, who said, you know, whilst the first world's and developed countries' conversation about AI is indeed displacement of people, you know, where's the human in the loop? The developing countries have a huge opportunity from an AI perspective. If there's infrastructure, if there's regulation, if there's capital that gets deployed, because then we can use AI to do things like education differently in remote places, healthcare differently in remote places. So I think it depends on whether these other things are put in place. Yeah. Now, you know, I think this is probably a conversation that needs more players than corporates, yeah? To be able to do that. Can corporates play a role? Yeah, I'm pretty sure they can. And then, of course, yeah, AI is power hungry, but AI also has the chance, and that's what I was trying to allude to earlier. You know, that there's a lot that AI can also do in terms of being much more within planetary boundaries, if deployed well. But again, it's about where we choose to deploy the technology, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to add to that. I would agree that as a whole, the ledger is not socially positive right now. We as an industry are in the red. A part of that is there's still a ton of research on making large language models much more energy efficient. We're doing a lot of that. These are, you know, foundational frontier models that we are building that are much more conservative from a training cost perspective than what the other labs are doing. And those techniques are getting out. The Chinese are using a lot of them as well to build their frontier models. From a surplus perspective, right, the industry as a whole has not created the economic value that we want to pay for the kinds of social advances. But I would say that I think, you know, there is going to be an explosion of startups that really take the LLM capability into developing markets that help those people really leapfrog multiple cycles of labor market development. So I'm very excited about those. They're very, very early. But we believe in human ingenuity to solve everything from the energy crisis as well as you know, bringing more meaningful jobs and labor to developing countries through the use of LLMs. But I'm with you that as a whole, it's negative.
So I saw first you.
Thank you. My question would go to Judith in particular. Look, we've just discussed, or you guys have discussed, that agentic AI is going to be a major onslaught onto the workplace, and obviously this is going to happen. And we now, you know, nobody knows when it's going to happen exactly. Is it today? Is it tomorrow? Whatever. However, what I missed in your conversation, you touched upon it very lightly, is about what happens with your existing organizations, and in particular, the psychology and the fear that goes to that. Now, if I take a very fast-growing organization, that's relatively easy because all that additional capacity can be filled in by a mixture between the existing ones and agentic. But take Siemens in particular as an organization, which I happen to know well, and is not protected by regulation like Alessandro's, lucky for you. A majority of the people will not have all those growth mind and think possibilities. On average, you either will have to reduce your workforce massively, or you will cease to exist. So how do you deal with that? I mean, I'm a bit provocative, but yeah, only a tad.
And I think it's partly a question of timing, yeah, in terms of what happens when and how quickly do you want things to happen and when. If I look at, and I think I said it earlier, 27% of our workforce today is still in Germany. Germany has a massive demographic issue. We have a massive demographic issue. Yeah? We're going to lose north of 35% of our German workforce in the next 10 years. Yeah, either
Because of retirement.
either through retirement or through voluntary turnover, which in our case is nothing, is 1.5% that we have in terms of voluntary turnover. So I think we are very representative as a company also of many others who will need to decide how quickly they want to drive productivity as in automation and therefore jobs going away, and to what extent we invest in augmentation. I think the answer is both. Yeah? But there comes a point where, from a demographic perspective, there's simply not going to be the labor market availability, and so it is even not desirable to want to keep the number of jobs up in the way that we have today. So I think that's a timing thing. And then there's something that I deeply believe in, and we need to see to what extent that gets contested with the speed of developments, because I think it's also worth saying that this is the very first time in humanity that technology is developing faster than our capacity to learn. And I think that is I think the fundamental fear that some experience, but I would say after a first kind of, what is this? We've lowered barriers. We've now got more people to try this out. But I don't think that we've seen the really fundamental redesign yet that will come. And then we need to see to what extent can we really take people with us? How many people can we take with us? So I think some of that change is yet to come. And I don't want to underestimate it or talk that down in any way. But one of the things that is really important to me, and this is also the conversation I've had with the Works Council for a long time, and that goes beyond AI. I think AI exacerbates that. We grew up, people our age, in a world where learning was front-loaded. Yeah? And then you kind of sprinkle it on top until you get to the end of your career. We wanted jobs that actually don't change. Yeah? There's a lot of people who stay in the same job for a long time rather than rotate. We needed to get to a place anyway where people understand that learning is like going to the gym. Yeah? You lose muscle memory very quickly, and the same goes for learning capacity. And the other thing is, we needed from a German co-determination perspective also, and here language is really important to me, to get from a place where we don't talk about job security in a way that says Works Council, unions and Siemens sign a piece of paper. We can do that, and we have done that. Yeah, but this is about helping people understand that job security is linked to employability, is linked to being resilient and relevant, and that people need to have a vested interest in investing in themselves. And we as employers have a duty to help that, at least to an extent. But that is a very different conversation, or that was at least one that I thought was an important one to have, where we really, also have an adult conversation amongst us to say, this is what's going to happen, this is what you can do, this is where we're able to help, and then let's see how we go through that together. I don't know whether...
Yeah.
I don't want to monopolize the discussion, so I think we'll have it first.
Thank you so much. I think I wish we could continue further and further, but I've got a signal that we have to go out with that. Sorry so much. But I take this back. Let's be Spider-Man. Yeah. I like that, be responsible with the agentic world. Thank you so much, guys, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you.